So our next guest on our How to Market and Promote Your Memoir interview series is Karen McCann. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Jay.
Karen's the author of 3 best-selling travel books. She's an American writer who moved to Seville, Spain in 2004, just for a year, and has been living there ever since. Her travel tips and adventure stories have appeared in Huffington Post, International Living Magazine, New York Daily News, Los Angeles Times, and Lonely Planet. And Karen's an avid blogger, and today we're going to be discussing how to define your audience and why it matters, and how to use your blog to attract more readers. So before we get started, Karen, can you just give us a little bit of an overview of your kind of author journey and how you came to write your books?
Sure. I grew up in California and lived in Cleveland, Ohio for 20 years. And when my husband and I first discovered Spain and fell in love with it, we moved here with the thought of doing all sorts of things, but writing was not really big on my list at that time. I've always been a writer, but journalist professionally. I decided not to pursue that when I was here. I just wanted to live and absorb and figure out how to speak Spanish and learn how to dress the way they dress here and all that stuff. But as so often happens, I kept telling my stories to people. They seemed to enjoy them. And as a writer, that's sort of like catnip. And there's a tickle in the back of your brain that says, gee, this is sort of fun. Maybe I should someday put together a book. And then one of those odd things, I just woke up one morning and the whole structure of the book, the stories I would use, everything was kind of in my head all at one time. We'd lived here in Seville, Spain for maybe, 4 or 5 years. And so I just began the process. I just jumped in and started writing. And I have been doing a ton of writing ever since, and it's been wonderful. I've been very lucky, and I've had some great readers too.
So let's delve into the topic of audience definition and how you use your blog to attract your readers. So how long have you been blogging?
The first blog went up, I had to look it up, I couldn't remember, December of 2011. So it's been a while.
And so your blog came first and then you thought about writing a book, or did they all kind of come together as one and it became a content marketing strategy straight from the off?
No, first I wanted to write the book. I had this moment of clarity. I saw how I wanted to put the whole thing together. And so I just sat down and started writing. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me that I was not only going to have to publish this thing, but I was going to have to market it. And I got very interested in that whole process. And one of the first and best pieces of advice I got was start a blog, because you're going to want to somehow capture the attention of readers. So social media became very important. I'm also involved on Facebook, to a much lesser degree on Twitter. The book got started, then the blog got started, and that was public for about 6 months before the book was published.
So when you had your moment of clarity and you started writing your book, did you have the idea of your ideal audience in mind, or you were just wanted to get your words out onto the page?
I find that there's a natural collection of people that want to hear travel stories. And so I paid a lot of attention to the people in my immediate physical orbit who gave me good feedback. And then I sort of applied the same techniques and awarenesses online. I really pay a lot of attention to comments. I encourage people to comment on Facebook and on my blog posts, and I do get a lot of comments. It's sort of an ongoing conversation, and each comment gives me a little bit more information about what people are looking for.
So then how did you take your raw information of your book and then start blogging the content? Did you take sections from it, or how did you approach that process?
No, I actually look at them as separate, particularly with the first book, because what I did in the blog was tell all the stories that I really wanted to put in the book and I knew were not going to fit. I was trying to be really fairly strict about sticking to topic in the book, and it was driving me crazy because one story would spark a memory of another story and I'd really want to tell it. And so I just started doing that on my blog. I like to blog in a more contemporary fashion. In other words, I like to blog in the moment and blog about things that are happening to me right now when I can. Mm-hmm. I like to write about what's going on in my life now, what's going on in the world now. When I write about Seville, I like to write about the festivals that are happening right this minute. And I think it makes it more fresh.
How much does your target audience drive what you write?
Well, I know that what my readers seem to want are 3 things. They want some humor. They want some information that they can use, how to pack a suitcase. And they want just a little philosophy, just a little take-home message that they go back and think about and maybe comment on in the comments below the post itself. I find that if I get all three of those elements into a post, people are very happy with it.
At what point in your blogging journey did you decide that it was important to really look at defining your audience? And, you know, before you started getting the comments and the blog comments and your social media comments, what was your starting point for identifying your audience?
Well, I thought about the content of my first memoir, the one about moving to Seville, and I thought, who's moving to Seville? Who would be the audience for this book? But I looked into who travels and what their interests are, and I found that my comments seemed to reinforce what my initial instincts were. For instance, readers who are men and women, but I know it's far more women than men. I have readers of all ages, but I know it tends to be people who are middle-aged and older who are thinking, you know, I am going to have this incredible opportunity to start traveling, either when I retire or my spouse retires. That's the audience that seems to be most solidly into reading my posts. And so I started out with this idea in mind, and it just keeps getting reinforced by the comments that I get all the time.
And I think part of the benefit of blogging or writing books in a specific niche, it makes it easier to identify your target audience.
Yes, I mean, my audience travels. Far more of them come from the United States, but quite a lot come from Great Britain and from other parts of the world where English is spoken, often as a second language. I have a number of readers in Germany, for instance. I have found that the audience that I am speaking to is a very interesting audience. You know, writing is like a conversation. It's not just me spouting something off. If it was that, it would simply be therapy or a drunken rant. Nothing wrong with those. Lord knows we've all done it. But I really think that it's important to think of writing a book or writing a post as a dialogue, not a monologue. So I talk about things, and I feel that my readers are able to understand me pretty well. One of the things I really strive for is clarity. I have friends who are bloggers that like to throw a lot of foreign terms into their posts. I do too, but I always explain them. I get very lost sometimes in my friends' posts, interesting as they are, because they assume that everybody knows what this word means, and I often don't. I don't speak that much French. I don't speak that much tech talk. So I try to make sure that everything that I do is extremely clear and able to be understood by anybody of any generation.
Yeah, I think the key there that you're talking about is that dialogue versus a monologue. And if you're having a dialogue, you're starting a conversation with your readers, and then they almost become part of the journey. And it's how do you deepen that conversation? So what kind of tools do you use? You said you read comments, but is that just daily review of your blog comments and going on social media, or is there something more complex?
Well, mostly that's what it is. I really listen. I read, of course, Amazon as well. I read all of these comments and try to find the threads, the common threads that run through them. And for the most part, I see that it's people love adventure. And they love to think of me going off and doing some goofy thing, and they're thrilled that they don't have to do it. They're not armchair travelers. They're real travelers. And they want to know that I am maybe pushing the envelope just a little more than they would, but that it's also within the realm of a normal person's possibility.
You think no matter what topic you blog about, that you'll be able to carry that core audience along with you because they have those key elements of the humor, the information that you were talking about before? I
think for the most part, I can carry them along. As a matter of fact, quite recently, I have been including a lot more social commentary on my posts. I find that this is an era in which people are pretty desperately interested in what's going on in the world. And I feel, for me, it would not be appropriate to completely ignore some of the issues that touch on my particular area. For instance, net neutrality, I feel very strongly about. I feel that freedom of the press is pretty important. So I might talk about those things a little bit when they are in the news, because I think that people are thinking about them in the context of the kind of work that I do.
Is there any things that you blog about that you feel are key to the brand that you're trying to develop around your travel writing, that if you didn't have that element in a blog post or in a book, that it wouldn't be your true voice?
Well, I think the humor. I like to laugh. I think people like to laugh. I find that travel often involves a certain amount of tension. People are anxious. to some degree or another when they're on the road, sometimes pleasantly excited, sometimes absolutely stark raving terrified, but there's always that slight edge of anxiety. And so what I think I'm doing is helping people see how to be in a situation that might be a little bit disquieting, or they're a little uncertain, or they don't know how to handle it, and have a sense of humor about it, have a sense of treating it as an adventure rather than as an annoyance. What I like to present people with is some idea of how you deal with adversity, with humor and with a sort of enterprising spirit. Let's see if we can solve this problem. So I think that's my trademark right there.
You're attracting your readers to your blog, and once they get there, what do you want them to do? Is it just to entice them to read a blog, or do you use it as an advertising and promotional forum as well?
Oh no, the goal is for them to, just fall in love with my writing and buy my books. It was originally designed according to a business model that a friend taught me, is that the purpose of social media is to drive business to your website so that you can sell something. That was how it started out, and it still is a big part of what I do. However, the blog has taken on a life of its own. I truly love the process of doing it. And I publish every single week, and I look forward to the comments. There are some people that comment a lot. Some people never comment, but then I'll run into them somewhere and they'll talk all about the post as if, they wait all week for it. But the people who are my readers tend to be very loyal and stick with it for long periods of time, and it becomes an ongoing conversation.
So if somebody was a new travel writer, was coming to the internet for the first time and was thinking about writing a book or starting a blog, what's the advice that you'd give them to get them started?
Well, first of all, I would really urge them to think about their readers, because quite often I read new travel bloggers who just write a factual account of what happened. And maybe it was really fun for them to sit on a beach at sunset and sip a really good Mai Tai. That's not a good story. That's actually rather dull. I mean, it's cool when it's happening to you, but nobody wants to read about it. What they want to read about are the things that went wrong, the disasters, the missed trains, the lost luggage, the slightly scary encounters, or whatever, something that gives it a little bit of zip and sparkle and shows how something is accomplished. You need to convey a sense of experience that they want to share in and that they can share in. Another thing I would strongly recommend is proofreading. I know that the internet is a little bit more forgiving of spelling errors and grammatical errors, but to me it really makes a blog look very amateurish. And when I see a headline that's got at least 2 grammatical errors in it, it makes it hard for me to have confidence in anything else that the writer is doing. So I would say that that's really important. Another one is tons of pictures. People love pictures. And blog regularly is very important. I do it once a week. Some people do it more often. A regular blogging schedule is really important, because otherwise it will never be the first thing on your agenda and it'll be too easy for it to disappear.
How do you see your blog evolving?
Well, I'm sort of waiting to see. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I travel a lot. We occasionally do these, what they call experimental travel, like traveling without luggage or whatever. If we can think of some other weird things to do, we might do that. But generally speaking, I think that what I'm doing right now works for me. As I say, I've got a little bit more social commentary in the blog, and that seems to actually be popular with my readers. So I will probably continue in that vein and see how it goes.
So do you have more books up your sleeve?
I do, and I have another one that isn't a memoir, although it will certainly have tons of my stories in it, but it's about travel and how it changes us. When we set out to have an adventure, the first thing we discover is ourselves. And that is the theme of this next book. Finding out about who we are by placing ourselves in strange and interesting experiences. People write to me all the time and say they're coming to Seville and want to get together with me. It's been a really interesting experience. I was so shocked because I remember reading Peter Mayel and writers like that, and I thought you would have to be world famous and, the most popular writer on the planet to have stuff like that happen. But I am amazed. I get so many letters, and have so many visitors. And when I possibly can, I do meet with people because I enjoy the conversation and writing. And it's really fun to meet somebody that you've been corresponding with on the blog for months or years. So that's been a real positive side of the whole thing too for me.
Lots of people don't like reading blogs because they think they're not as good as books, but there's a core audience of people that just love blogs and love that interaction of that short form content.
I agree. I think that's really true. I think there is a certain audience, the social media audience generally is attracted to short form, snappy, lots of pictures, that sort of thing. One of the problems with blogging is that it's so informal, and often there are people who, as I said earlier, are very sloppy about grammar and sloppy about facts. I read a lot of things that I think are a little questionable. So when you are a blogger, I think it's your job, I feel that it's my job, to be as factual as I can, to be as grammatically correct as I can, and to make sure that what I'm saying is really the truth. I think that's really important. But I know that not everybody does that. And I think some people do not like blogs because they don't trust them. The other thing that we haven't really touched on is sponsorship. One part of my brand that is very important for me is I don't accept sponsorships of any kind. A lot of young bloggers who have to make a living off their blog and not off of books or other means feel that it's necessary to have sponsors. I think that's fine. It's just a different business model than the one that I am following. But I think that there is a possibility that, again, you lose credibility. And I think that's another thing that people who don't like blogs sometimes cite. Whatever bargain you make, you should probably tell your readers what you're doing. If you are getting a sponsored hotel stay as a travel writer, I think you should let people know that. If I know that going in, I'm perfectly fine with it. I accept it. I take their praise with a grain of salt and a dash of pepper and some Worcestershire sauce, but I will read the post if it's got some interesting information in it.
Blogs are a cornerstone of an author's brand. And so I think that all the content that you have on your blog has to represent who you are as a writer.
Yes, and it has to represent who you are in your books, so that there is a sort of seamlessness between the two. You may write somewhat different things on one than the other, but I think that if you are drawing in readers with one kind of blog, it's a good idea to have the books carry that same voice through so that people feel they know who you are. I'll tell you, people feel like they know Rich and me intimately now. It's amazing. Just a couple of memoirs, and people come up to us at parties that we've never met. Somebody walked up to Rich the other day and said, "I feel like I know you so well." He was really disconcerted. Occasionally I do an interview with him. He's, of course, in my books. And he's beginning to feel like a media personality just because I'm telling stories about him all the time.
Well, it just shows the power of blogs and how people do feel that they know you, because you've obviously created a strong connection between you, your adventures, and your audience, that they feel that when they do meet you, that's it, or you're part of the family almost. Any new author who's starting out, if they don't have a blog, they're missing a big trick there. And this is relevant not just for nonfiction, but for fiction as well. How to get them to connect with what you're writing by using your blog and to reel them in. And then they fall in love with your blog and then will become an avid reader and a brand ambassador for all of your books.
That's the idea. That's the shoot for. I think blogging is so wonderful. And I was thinking about it today when I was getting ready, thinking about the interview, that we are the first generation that has this tremendous gift of a constant dialogue with our readers. I mean, in the past, maybe a few newspaper journalists, but really almost nobody had an opportunity to get the feedback and the interplay so that they have this conversation that can last for years and years going on their blog. It's a tremendous gift just as a person and as a writer. And of course, it does build some brand loyalty, and people do seem to be happy to buy my books when they come out. So that's always very refreshing and very gratifying.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, Karen, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me today. This is great. This has made me feel energized about blogging, because sometimes it just gets overwhelming and you do wonder whether it's having any value or purpose, because it is a time-consuming process. But I think at the end of the day, if you do have that integrity and that authenticity in what you write, then I don't think you can go wrong.
I absolutely agree.